this webinar, just as a heads up for everybody who isn't able to join us today. I'm going to go ahead and get started by introducing myself. I'm Liz Niemer, the Program and Communications Manager for Twin Cities Diversity in Practice. Later on in this presentation, you'll also hear from a couple of our panelists. But before we get to that part, I'm just going to give a brief overview of our TCDIP 1.0 Clerkship program. A few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, feel free to ask aloud or put your questions in the chat. You're also welcome to raise your hand and we can call on you as needed. If we need to restart this webinar at any time, check your email for a new link. As I think you all are aware, the Twin Cities Diversity in Practice 1.0 Clerkship program has been going on for over a decade now. We've launched the careers of law students of color in the Twin Cities through this pipeline program, which works with both law firms and corporate legal departments to give law students of color a great summer experience. A few sort of FAQ overview details. What organizations are eligible to participate? All TCDIP member organizations are eligible to participate. Law firms must be a TCDIP member organization. However, the corporate partner does not necessarily need to be a member of Twin Cities Diversity in Practice. So if there is a particular client that the law firm would like to work with to host a TCDIP 1.0 clerk, and they aren't yet a member of Twin Cities Diversity in Practice, please do still reach out to that corporate organization. We would be delighted to have them participate as a corporate host for the 1.0 Clerkship program. If you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. TCDIP markets the program across the country to law students of color. We, of course, target the local law schools here, as well as regional law schools. We're going to be taking a trip to Wisconsin and Chicago this year to market the program to various law schools in Madison, Marquette, and the Chicago area. And we also target historically Black colleges and universities as well. Who hires and pays TCDIP 1.0 clerks? This is a question that we get a lot. The law firm is responsible for the hiring process and for paying the clerks for the duration of their employment. This includes the time that they are seconded to the corporate partner. In terms of collaborating with the corporate partner through the hiring process, that is up to the law firm and corporate organization. If you are very close with your corporate organization and want their input at various stages of the hiring process, we of course encourage you to work with them and to start that process and communication on the earlier side. However, again, because the law firms are responsible for paying the entirety of the salary, and overall law firms are generally more likely to hire the student either back for a second summer or for full-time employment after they've graduated from law school. The hiring decision is ultimately down to the law firm. A few just sort of off the bat tips for collaborating on the TCDIP 1.0 Clerkship program. We do encourage law firms and corporate legal departments to get started on that collaborative communication process sooner rather than later. A few things to discuss when working with a partner organization. Again, as I just mentioned, how involved the corporate organization will be with the hiring process. Any agreements or documents that need to be signed. So if your firm or corporate organization has various has various legal documents for seconding the summer to a corporate organization, or if there are other documents that either organization needs signed, very important to get those dealt with upfront. Chris, I saw your comment in the chat. Yes, I will be happy to send this out by email as well. Another thing to discuss with your partner organization right off the top is the schedule. Now that we are embracing hybrid work environments at many organizations, it's opened up a lot of flexibility in scheduling, but has also created some difficult parameters as well in some cases. So being just very open and transparent about what the summer will look like. I think Emily and Lori will have some to share about that in a minute as well. And then also just when you are reaching out to organizations, I know I sent out a spreadsheet to member representatives and recruiting contacts. Please do just CC both the member representative and the recruiting professionals if they're listed. The recruiting professionals at various firms and organizations are often, managing several different, whether it's summer programs, internship programs, et cetera. And they will be really helpful in working on the partnership between the two organizations. In terms of supervising and evaluating 1L clerks, we value feedback for 1L clerks at every stage of the process from both organizations. Law firms and corporate legal departments both should make sure that they have a designated supervisor with each work setting. We encourage supervisors at both work settings to provide timely feedback and evaluation for the clerks. We, of course, understand that the law firm side will likely have a little bit more rigorous evaluation because they have the clerks for the majority of the time and they are assigning sort of more substantive work. The corporations, the clerks might be doing more things like sitting in and observing calls, et cetera, but feedback is still really valuable in terms of how clerks behave at their corporate setting, and passing along any feedback to the law firm as well is always really valued by the law firms. A couple of important dates here. So 1L Clerkship registration opened today. I think everybody got an email, but I'll also put a link in the chat here in just a few minutes. Both the law firm and the corporate partner do need to fill out a registration form. TCDIP staff will, of course, be checking on the back end, and if there are corporations that are lagging in the registration process, we'll be reaching out to them. But when you are setting up these partnerships, just keep in mind that both organizations do need to fill out the registration form. Registration is open from now until October 28th, and then the student application process will open on November 16th. This year, we are going to encourage all clerks to submit their applications by January 15th. I know many organizations accept applications on a rolling basis, and you're still welcome to review those applications on a rolling basis and hire on a rolling basis, but just in terms of sort of encouraging clerks to submit things sooner rather than later, we're encouraging them to follow that informal deadline. And that is the brief overview that sort of goes through all of the main FAQ questions. And so now we're going to open up the webinar to our Q&A portion with our two panelists, Emily Cavillou from Faegre Drinker and Lori Lannon from Wells Fargo. Emily, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody here on the call?
I'm Emily Cavillou. I'm an associate recruiting manager at Faegre Drinker, and I'm based out of the Minneapolis office. I've been working with TCDIP for I think just over 5 years now, so I've always been involved in the TCDIP partnership program, and happy to be here today.
And Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Lannon. I'm happy to be here today. I am lead counsel in employment at Wells Fargo, and I actually started my legal career in Minnesota. I'm originally from Indiana at Faegre. And so I have been involved with the TCDIP for many years in various ways, and currently as the co-chair of the clerkship program at Wells Fargo in Minneapolis this last summer.
And could both of you speak to sort of why your organization participates in the TCF 1L Clerkship every year? Emily, do you want to start?
Yeah, so Faegre Drinker has, like I said, in the past 5 years, I've been with Faegre, we participated in TCDIP, and each year it's actually grown. So right now, Faegre manages 9 client partnerships through TCDIP, and we really believe in the mission to, attract and retain legal professionals of color to Minneapolis, in particular. And we think it's really important, and it can be just really energizing to get these folks who this may be their first entry into the legal profession. It may be their first job. For a lot of folks, it's their first time in a law firm. And so to have this partnership where they can go in-house and see how it works on the client side can just really offer such a wealth of information to these folks on how what they're doing at a law firm fits into the in-house side of things, and just builds a more comprehensive picture for a young legal professional that I think is just invaluable as they really start off their career.
Yeah, and similarly, for us, Wells Fargo, we have this long relationship with Twin Cities Diversity in Practice, and it's our opportunity to help develop minority law students, and we had 5 clerks this last year with 5 different partner firms. And we get to show students corporate culture in the Twin Cities, and specifically Wells Fargo's corporate culture. And, our part of the program is, shorter than, our law firm, partner law firm programs. And, so we don't see our role as, that this is our chance to assign, a bunch of work that, some of the lawyers can't get to, or, for these law students, it's really more of our opportunity to help develop these students and, give them a glimpse of what it's like to work in a corporate law department. And also it's a chance to partner with our outside firms in a different way too. It's great to see our partner firms who we already have established relationships with, to work with them and know that they have a similar commitment to diversity in the legal profession in the Twin Cities.
And when it comes to building those partnerships, what are some of the tips that you've learned over the years and pitfalls that people can hopefully avoid when setting up the partnership between a law firm and a corporate legal department?
Emily, you want me to take that one first? Since we're on the client side. So it does help to have a good working relationship to start with your corporate partner, being on the corporate side of things. And what I mean by that is just to kind of know your partner well. Wells Fargo, we are, a large company. We have, established processes, which, at times can mean things take a little bit longer to work out, that, we might have a little less flexibility. And so if you already know those sorts of things about your corporate partner, those are helpful as you're, especially in a first time, if like this is your first time participating in the program. You get to work out certain things like, what kind of role does your corporate partner want in the selection process or interviewing process, if any. I know we do not take an active role in the selection or interview process of clerks. We do leave that to our law firm partners to figure out. And so that's something that's just, good to know your corporate client and kind of how they work, how fast they work, kind of what their expectations are for legal work could kind of give you a sense of, what their expectations would be like as a partner in the program.
Yeah, and I would add to that from a law firm side, planning this experience and recruiting 1Ls, I think just to reiterate the importance of Lori's point about knowing your client, especially on the interview side of things, as we recruit 1Ls this coming winter, it really is imperative to get ahead of it and know, if we have some partners, for example, that some partnerships, for example, that they say if there's a particular skill set, we would like to have this particular skill set if possible, and so you can have that top of mind as you're sort of building your candidate matrix, so that if they're you may find that not diamond in the rough, but that really particular skill set that could honestly be a fantastic fit for what this client is hoping for. It doesn't always work out, but it is a way to be intentional about the hiring that you're doing and add that level of client service. I think too, just really being having a clear picture of what it looks like when you're getting to the offer stage. I think that interviewing is one stage of this, but does the client want to be involved in some way in an offer decision or seeing the top 2 finalists? I think that's that really specific ebb and flow of the partnership on, how much we can work together on that when the firm has its overall hiring picture, but just to make sure that you're getting it out in the front end so that you don't get caught on a back foot after you've made offers and there was maybe some dissonance there. But overall, just to build an intentional partnership, I think it's always helpful to start early. And on the law firm side, we're very intentional to do a quick review of our partnerships in August and September to make sure that from a hiring committee perspective, we're in a good spot. And if we have any other partners that would like to partner with us through TCDIP, we're evaluating those in a timely manner so that by employee registration, we can just sort of follow those steps of reaching out and knowing what the plan is. I think just sort of that pre-planning for the employer registration aspect is sets you up for success, because those 3 weeks go pretty quick when you're trying to get everything settled nicely.
We do have a question from Mark in the chat from Ameriprise, asking if when a clerk is going through an interview at a law firm that will be partnering with a corporate partner, does the firm know at that time which specific partner organization? And I think I'll let Emily answer this in a minute, but I think the answer is going to be it depends. Many firms will only have one corporate partner, and so at that time, obviously, those students will know what their partnership organization is going to be. But for the firms that do have multiple partner organizations, I would say that the majority of them sort of wait to see what the best fit is for each of their sort of finalist candidates. And of course, want to also accommodate students as well. Students may express an interest in a particular corporate partner, and of course, we want to make students happy too. But Emily, any sort of as somebody juggling 9 different organizations, your thoughts?
Yeah, so we, and I worked at a firm as well where we just had one partnership, and so it's very apparent and that's also if you have permission to talk about the client at the interview stage or talk about the type of work the client does. I know that some folks, I think it goes into a question we may talk about later about what makes a good job posting and publicizing where this 1L is going to work. But for employers that have more than one partnership, in my experience, we do the interviewing first, and then, like Liz said, you can see sort of where those interests are, who is skewing, more financial or more health, so that you can do the pairing more on the back end. But of course, you're also kind of keeping an eye out for what the clients are hoping for as well. So you may have one sort of dog-eared for, as I think this will be a good fit for this client, but in our situation, we would rarely, make that during the interview, just to make sure we've got all of our ducks in a row before we're promising these 1Ls a really exciting opportunity. We want that to be, true, and we don't want to have to change course in any way afterwards. So it's been helpful on our end to set expectations by making those decisions afterwards, to the extent that we can.
And so both of you have sort of touched on this, but when it comes to, or wait, sorry, Lori, did you get to answer the question about expectations? And
well, I thought Emily did a pretty good job of answering it. I think that's, on the corporate side, and just in my experience with our company, because we have such a large legal department and we have a pretty big presence in Minneapolis. You know, we, you know, it's obviously nice if you're, you know, looking to hire clerks and you're thinking, well, if they've got an interest in financial services, that, you know, that would be a good fit for Wells Fargo. But I will say, being an employment lawyer, you know, it's you know, you can do employment law in a lot of different places, and you know, some of the you know, the issues are going to be, you know, similar across whatever business you have. And so we like to tell our partners that, you know, if your clerk has a preference already, and has, you know, for some reason they've decided what area of law they're going to practice after first year. I know, you know, not many of them do, and I would expect not many of them would. But in case they do, we'd still like to say we would like to provide a well-rounded experience, which means, you know, we're going to make sure that, you know, we're having them meet with people in all of our different divisions and give them a chance to learn that, you know, there are so many ways to practice law. And so we do try to make it more of a general experience, even if a clerk has a preference.
And Emily, do you have any tips for creating a great job posting for the TCDIP 1L Quickship program?
So if you have a 1L position that's currently open, I think making sure that you're highlighting the similarities and differences between the opportunities, making sure that a 1L student knows if they're applying, if you're offering, this client partnership clerkship versus, a regular 10 to 12 weeks or whatever it looks like just with a firm, that there's very specific expectations attached. And, Liz, I don't actually know if you have some preferences on this, but, we even link to TCDIP's website and their mission statement so that folks know sort of what TCDIP's goal is, especially if you're having folks that are not from the Minneapolis or Twin Cities area who may be interested in trying out the Minneapolis market. So really trying to be as, upfront with the information that we have and the partners that we're working with. And then, like I said earlier, if you have clearance to name your client, or even kind of referring to the type of work your client does, if there are issues with naming a client in a job post, that it can be if you're looking for that targeted draw, it could be cool. And I think that name recognition does can be helpful to say, I know that place. That would be really cool if I could work there. And, you may even get them at a screening interview saying, I applied because I'm hoping to work with X or Y client, which could be helpful if you have multiple partnerships to fill.
And I will say, Liz, we don't participate in any of that process, but one thing to call out is, if you do end up with, applicants who have, work visas or student visas, do make sure that those, if you, with your corporate partner, that that's something they can work with internally. And when I say that, I mean, obviously a corporate partner is going to, follow all laws. It's more of a, can they get it done administratively, when you have someone who has a particular type of visa, so to where they can actually get them to start on time. So that's something it's obviously not going to be in the job posting, but it is something to consider, as candidates are going through the process.
And because it's 2022, how do you set up students for success over the summer with a hybrid work environment?
Well, Lori, I could take that first, and then you can fill in anything else I miss. So the hybrid of it all, I think all of us are still getting used to this new post-COVID hybrid world. I think, just the ability to be as clear as you can about the expectations can be helpful. I think a lot of us in general are just looking for guidelines, and we're looking for some structure. And so to the extent possible, outlining even in the job description or in a screening interview, this is what we anticipate this may look like, to make sure that they would be, the 1L would be okay with, a client who expects them to be in 3 days a week or, have a hybrid situation. So I think sussing out what the client is expecting, we've all learned that we can't read, can't read tea leaves to figure out what the future holds, but it has been helpful for us to go to our client and say, what are you thinking in terms of a format that we could prep, so we could prep accordingly. And, even on our end as a law firm, if they're doing a hybrid rotation, they're still going to need what does their office at your firm look like? Are they going to be able to have an office while they are with the client so they can kind of bounce back in between where their home base is going to be during that time? So I think just kind of trying to think a little bit more granular about what that looks like. But overall, if you don't know, you can say, we don't have this figured out yet. But, being as transparent as you can throughout the process.
Yeah, it was by far the biggest challenge. And having been involved in our clerkship program, this was the 3rd year, because I've been with Wells Fargo for almost 3 years, you can plan one way when it's all one way or the other, or whether they're in person every day or, they're virtual every day. But hybrid does create a lot of challenges, and it's so important to set expectations and then set them some more and then again. And and I'm not talking about the clerks so much as, your internal folks and trying to put together a good program, because, this was new, this year, we are in the office 3 days a week. But over the summer, we went to 2 days a week, just for the summer, which, made it especially challenging for law clerks. And so we had to be really thoughtful about when we were going to hold events, how we were going to assign projects. But at the same time, we also didn't want to impose more restrictive expectations on the clerks than what we had for our own employees. And so if people could be flexible in those 2 days, which we can, then our clerks were going to be able to be flexible in which days they chose. Now, having said that, if we, planned an event on a certain day, we really hoped and expected that the clerks would be in that day. And so, and then we had some clerks who decided they preferred to be in every day, which you could totally do that. And we do have, some employees who decide to do that. But, that was a particular challenge, given that, our part of the summer, and this is something also to work out, with your partners, whether you're a corporate partner or a law firm partner, is when those clerks will start. And, it's totally understandable that for a good experience, the clerks are going to start with the law firms and they're going to end with the law firms. The law firms are paying them, and the law firms are taking a very active role in assigning projects and evaluating their work. And so that often means that the corporate partner is somewhere in the middle of that. And also in the middle of the summer is the 4th of July. And so that means trying to be real creative on when clerks will start. I know because we had hybrid schedules, I really, worked with our firms, our partner firms this last year to say, hey, can everybody start on a Wednesday? I know that's weird, but can all the clerks start on the Wednesday before the 4th of July week? So we have half a chance of having everyone in the office on their first day when they start, because Mondays are tough, Fridays are even tougher. And so we really wanted people to have, a day in the office, say on Tuesday, to prepare for the clerks to be in. And so that's why we went with Wednesday. Obviously, it's going to be different for, however your corporate culture is going to be. But I mean, that's how in the weeds, in the details, we had to get to make sure that we were providing the best experience we could be providing for the clerks, and then also giving our committee, our clerkship committee, half a chance of being there for the clerks.
And you guys have both talked a bit about expectations, but when it comes to expectations, both for the clerks and also the attorneys who will be working with the clerks, what kind of expectations do you really try to get out ahead of and set for everybody involved? Emily, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. In terms of expectations, I think that we really want our 1Ls to go and focus on the client work. They're going to be immersed in it. They're leaving us, and hopefully we've trained them enough to be able to hop in and try something else out for that 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever your partnership arrangement ends up being. But the really important thing on our end, and I know it'll be discussed in more detail on panels that are in April before the summer starts, is just that this is part of their experience. So it's part of the stuff we're evaluating them on in terms of giving them an offer for it to come back as a 2L. And so to the extent possible, whether or not you are having them do substantive work or even just inviting them to meetings, we want to know how that goes, because it can be really helpful and a really good indicator of how they do when they're not with us. And it could be that this type of work really lights them up and engages them in a way that we hadn't seen, and that can be really helpful, so that we have the full picture of the work they're doing. We want those 3 weeks to count for their portfolio of work, and so being really as clear as possible that we hope and expect to hear back from our clients for good or for bad. However it went, we want to know how that went for you, so that we can put it in our little 1L, our 1L's file, and make a really good and well-informed decision at the end of the summer, which the end of the summer creeps up closer and closer to recruiting season. And so I think the timeliness of knowing how it's going to, we may be seeming to be annoying about it, but really it's because the offer decisions are continually being pushed and pushed and pushed earlier into the summer, which is why we're hoping to hear back.
Yes. And, that was, I feel like I learned more and more about how things have changed when it comes to recruiting over the years. And it's a nice reminder. I feel like this last year in particular, as some of us, corporate partners, the lawyers get further and further away from, their law school years. It's important, and as we learned, we tried to, let our committee know that just remember, we are dealing with first-year law students. That doesn't necessarily mean they are of a certain age, but, ours were of a certain age in a different generation. And so, it's a reminder that in some cases, this might be their first professional job. We're also coming out of a pandemic.
Oh, there we go. Looks like Lori is a little bit stuck with some technical difficulties. Hopefully she joins us soon again. But it looks like, there are many people here who have hosted a 1L clerk before, but some who haven't. Do you have any specific advice for people who are taking on their very first TCDIP 1L clerk?
So folks taking on their first TCDIP 1L clerk, I think that just making sure that you have your, from a firm perspective, because that's the one I know, just make sure that you have your matrix of stakeholders. You know, who is attached to the client, you know, who will be communicating with the client? Is that your recruit? You know, for our partnerships, I manage the client correspondence, but you may have a different way that you handle it, or someone else that's really relaying these information requests, or, you know, sending over resumes. What is that going to look like for you? Just to make sure that that you're doing everything in a way that makes sense for you and your organization. And I think, you know, Liz is fantastic. She didn't pay me to say this. Liz is wonderful, and TCDIP is phenomenal. And they are excellent resources if you do have any questions on how to manage your first 1L partnership cycle. Just a wealth of information. And, you know, I think with the community of folks that are involved on the law firm side, I know I have worked with other law firms getting involved just to provide, you know, some perspective that I can share. And so I feel like it's generally a supportive community to lean on each other and see to what extent you can share kind of like how you do it and how it may differ. But just going into that 1L recruiting cycle, knowing generally what to expect. Life will throw us some curveballs, you know, sometimes a global pandemic, but all in all, lean on your resources when you have any questions, and you know that you're going to get someone wonderful, and it'll be really energizing to see them grow and flourish.
Chris, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you for this. This is really exciting. We are a first-time corporate member. We just signed up. We were able to persuade the board to expand the definition of Twin Cities a little bit, because we're down here in Rochester, but many of the law firms that we work with are Twin Cities based for outside counsel. And I guess my question really has to do with that aspect of it, which is we have several law firms that we work with as outside counsel pretty regularly who are listed as members of TCDIP. Any tips or pointers for those of us who are trying to figure out how to encourage one of our law firm partners to work with us in this regard, having not done so before?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, go for it, Emily.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that, you know, some things to think about are, you know, in persuading, you say persuading a law firm, I think it offers, you know, a unique opportunity to say, you know, that you would, you know, for all intents and purposes, host them out of Rochester, and what that looks like. I think just having a plan for, or just maybe setting up a discussion for, what does that look like to get a 1L who may be living near the St. Thomas, Minneapolis campus? How do you get them to Rochester? Or what does that look like if there is an in-person expectation? That can be really helpful to get in front of. I mean, we even work with clients whose campuses are outside of the Twin Cities. And, you know, one of the things I was going to bring up is just that pesky reimbursement question of how do you get them there? How do you get them back? And what does that look like if you're paying for lifts for three weeks if someone doesn't have a license? But, you know, I think about having someone in Rochester, and the hybrid nature of it all could honestly be it even, not to say easier to sell, but something that could make even more sense in a hybrid situation where some things could be virtual. It seems like there could be a lot of arrangements within that. Chris, I don't know if that's helpful, or if there's anything else you were hoping Liz and I would drill down on, or Liz, if you have anything else as well.
I would just say that, you know, that I would, yes, being open and transparent. A lot of firms are, you know, open to hosting more than one TCDIP 1L clerk, and so they may have a historical partnership, but they may be interested in taking on another clerk as well. You know, obviously, our goal as TCDIP is to host a great summer experience for the TCDIP 1L clerks and to start their careers here in the Twin City. But we also recognize that this is a business development opportunity for the firms and corporate legal departments. And so I think overall, the firms are eager to participate and host a TCDIP 1L clerk. And so reaching out, TCDIP, of course, is happy to facilitate introductions if needed.
Yeah, that
But
was maybe my follow-up question. Sorry, because I think in a very narrow kind of field, one has a small number of contacts at an outside counsel firm, and I was going to ask if you would be willing to reach out to our partner firms. So I'll just be totally honest. My initial run, and I'm not going to name firms, but my initial raising of the question with partner who's kind of overseeing a specific area of work at one of our outside counsel partners, who's also one of the TCDIP members, was not exactly a, oh yeah, we'd love to do that response. And I think it's just a matter of not finding the right person. And so I assume that we can turn to you and say, hey, who's the best contact at these firms who are members, who are the kind of champions of TCDIP within the firm, so that we can start off on the right foot.
yes, definitely send me an email and we'll get you in touch.
Thank you, Liz.
Lori, Chris was asking a question about advice for corporate departments who are reaching out to firms. Do you have any other advice for people making those connections?
That's well, I guess to the extent you have some law firms who are a little bit hesitant to do it. I mean, I guess, if they're already planning on hiring clerks, I do see it as a, if they spend 2 weeks, at your company, it's kind of like, that's a, I would feel like that would be a really good opportunity, especially, with the relationship with the law firm to do that, especially if they're able to work on, projects that are specific to your company. We do have, we have had clerks who, they get to work on projects that kind of do crossover with the law firm, what the law firm's working on for us in a particular area. And so, this is, it doesn't necessarily have to be or seem burdensome, especially if the company is ready to do it. I feel like companies, they're kind of like, well, what might we actually get out of this? And, we see it as more as like, this is being a good corporate citizen, and we get to, develop these law students, and it's not really more, so much what we get out of it. It's what, we can do for these students. And, it also helps strengthen the relationship with the law firm in the end. If you have certain firms, who are diversity and practice members, or you want to do a reach out maybe to your firms who you work with pretty well and see if they're doing that, I would hope they would be jumping on that to show their, commitment to the program and diversity. But so, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
One more question for Emily and Lori here. It's a bit of a softball, but if there are any other questions from the audience, think on those, because I'll be turning to you next. But what's your favorite part of participating in the TCDIP 1L clerkship program?
Yeah, so this is it actually for us is we get to meet new and interesting people. We get to be part of their development. We get a chance to, educate students on, how we work as a team. I'll also say selfishly, especially following the pandemic, it actually gave us internally a chance to work together again across divisions. So, Wells Fargo, we have a big legal department. But, we got to work together across our different divisions, lawyers who would really have no cause to work together on a project internally, working on a committee to put, put on a really good program for our clerks. And it gave us a chance to know each other new lawyers who had started during the pandemic, who we really hadn't gotten a chance to know, in addition to these clerks. And so it was kind of all figuring it out this last year together. The year before, it was, how do we do all of this virtually, And so, but it really is a chance to get to know your colleagues better and work together to put forward a really good program for clerks. And, we don't hire clerks out of law school. And so, this was really, it's our opportunity to, get a chance to develop people. It actually provides leadership opportunities too within, your corporate departments for people who don't necessarily manage folks. So there are a lot of great things about participating in the program that aren't necessarily on its face, other than, you're being a good corporate partner. Me personally, I'm a Hispanic attorney. I feel like it is my obligation to give back. And this is one of the ways I do that, is to, work on programs like this where we get to, develop minority law students.
Great. From a law firm side and from my perspective, I'm like deeply involved with the 1L's journey from start to finish. I think it's extremely fun and energizing to see them be so worried about starting with a client and wanting to make a good impression, and kind of getting almost like the first day of school jitters of like, I'm going to go and restart this new thing with a client. And then you see them 2 weeks later at a leadership dinner, and they're over here talking about how all this stuff that they've done, or this really cool meeting that they got to sit in on, that we may think, as professionals who like go to weekly meetings, it's pretty routine for us, but to have someone, it feels really special, even for these routine meetings, for these 1Ls, to have that opportunity. They feel like it's a very special thing that they get to be involved with, even if it's just observation, because really, how else would you have access to that type of information? Or and so it's fun to see them at events afterwards, really talking. They're talking about your organization. They're talking about what they're doing. Our attorneys are asking them what they think is interesting, and they're like walking billboards for how exciting your organizations are, which is just really, really cool to see. You see that quick development, and at the end, they feel like they don't have a full picture of what you do, but they really feel like they got to do something cool. And so that's always really fun to see.
All right. Any other questions from the audience here? Feel free to either type it in the chat or raise your hand and I can call on you.
In the meantime, Liz, I would love to talk about I have been in-house counsel at 2 different companies who have hosted TCDIP clerks. And if I could at least talk about, our internal process at Wells Fargo, and what's been great about that is we do have a committee. And that means that people have their certain roles to where it's not so overwhelming. Because if you are considering this program and you're a corporate partner, like, there's no way in the world I'm going to be able to, be ahead of a clerkship program and then also do all the things I do for my job. It is such a time commitment. But at the same time, if you're able to, establish a committee, spread out some of the responsibilities, give others an opportunity to have that leadership role. I'm happy to talk with anyone who's, would like to know what have you done, internally to make it a little bit easier, because if you are one person within a corporate legal department trying to be the coordinator, that can be a lot. But if you are one of many, I am a co-chair. We have vice chairs so that we know who's going to take over the program the next year. We have work coordinators, we have mentors, advisors, and we have a dedicated administrative assistant who volunteers every year to be like, I'm going to be the clerkship program administrative assistant. And so, these are things where, if you can spend the time up front, establishing a committee, getting that going, it's not the, burden you think it could turn into. And then it ends up actually being really great because everybody gets to work together and have their part.
Lori, how many people are on that committee, and sort of like what are the roles that they fulfill?
So we have 2 co-chairs, 2 vice chairs, 2 work coordinators, 2 event coordinators, and then we have as many mentors as we have clerks. So this year we had 5 designated mentors, and then we had 2 advisors, and then our administrative assistant. So that way, especially during the summer, especially in a hybrid, work environment, there's just not one person, who needs to be in the office at one time, that they're working together. And so the vice chairs, what we decided to do this year is, although they were learning from us, they were also kind of doubling as event coordinators, with someone else who was established as an event coordinator. But they were responsible for deciding what kind of welcome event, what kind of, events we would have to get to know everybody in the office, and then, our goodbye event. And then work coordinators handle the schedule for when they're starting. They handle all assignments that might come in, including observation opportunities. And then a panel, if we had a panel on networking that we did for the clerks. And then, just making sure that, especially for the first week, that their schedules are kind of set up. And we also had to plan for things like, what if they don't have email access on the first day, and that was an issue. And so making sure they had, a printed copy of their schedule, so they knew kind of where to be, just planning for things like that. And then mentors, we had, for the first day was a mentor lunch, but then, mentors were supposed to have, at least weekly meetings with their clerks. And, it's not necessarily an expectation, but I've been a past mentor prior to being a co-chair and a vice chair, that, mentors will have a relationship going well beyond the program. And so I still communicate with my mentee from, 2 summers ago. So, it's something that, everybody has, their role, and we explain it. We, have us pick a time where we ask for volunteers, make sure they're going to be available those weeks of the summer. So all of those things, but in the end, it really is helpful to have a team.
Thank you so much for giving more details about that process, Lori. It seems like you guys have really figured out how to work together. Question from Greg: how do you split the 1L schedule between the firm and corporate legal department? I'll ask Emily to answer some of this in a minute, but I will say off the bat, it is, again, one of those things that can depend on the relationship between the law firm and the corporate legal department, and what the goals are. There are some firms, especially when things were 100% virtual, that had the clerks sort of go 1 day a week throughout the summer. I would say with things being more hybrid and more in person, the schedule of like, okay, here's 2 or 3 specific weeks that you're at the corporate partner is more common again. But it's really up to the law firm and corporate legal department to sort of sit down and look at the schedule overall and see if there are, specific things that you want the clerk to be at either location for, and yeah, what the learning goals are for the clerk. Emily, you want to elaborate more?
Yeah, that was super helpful, Liz. I think a traditional window for Faegre Drinker has been 7 weeks with the firm, followed by 3 weeks with the client. So that makes up their 10-week rotation. Making sure we have all, usually it has been chunked so that the student can have that immersive 3-week experience. Although like Liz said, there are firms where maybe it makes more sense to do Mondays and Tuesdays with the client, Wednesday through Friday with the firm. Again, there is no set rule. We just found that because of, the 4th of July, it's every year we always have 4th of July, and you want to work around that and make sure that your expectations fit with the clients. We have 3 weeks with the firm or with client, but for some of our partnerships, we started at the end of June and they came back to the firm for the last week. We had some folks that were starting on the Wednesday after 4th of July and then coming back to the firm the Wednesday before the end of the program. So those specific details change partner by partner, but for the most part, we found it's helpful to have that immersive time to really give them a sense of what it's like to go to work in-house for 3 to 4 weeks. You also want to think about how long do you want them with the firm? How much data do you need on your end to be able to make that offer decision at the end, with the work that they have from the firm side.
And I would also say, I mentioned other structures, but I would say the most common structure is that, 2 to 3 week chunk at the end, like Emily was describing, out of, again, an 8 to 10 to 12 week program.
Yeah, and 3 weeks is typical for us. We did have, of our 5 clerks, we did have 1 clerk who was 2 weeks, which can make things a little difficult when, you have 4 clerks who are there a little longer and and then 1 clerk is, not getting that extra week. I think for those corporate partners who don't have 4 or 5 clerks like we typically, we do, is we're just, a bigger company, but 2 weeks is very short. 3 weeks is very short. 2 weeks is really, really short. And so if you have a 2-week program, I think you can have a 2-week program. It's just, to have any sort of substantive work assigned to a clerk is pretty difficult, but if that's not, if that's not what you're going to do, that you're going to have observation opportunities, you're going to set up some panels, you'll have, maybe a get to know you and then to see you real quick. But yeah, 2 weeks is pretty fast. And the feedback we've received on 3 weeks has been, gosh, I just wish we would have had longer. It's just never long enough, but 3 weeks is better than 2.
Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up here? All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. And if you have any questions that come to mind, feel free to email me at elmemer@diversity-in-practice or reach out again to that info@diversity-in-practice email address. This was recorded, so we'll be sending out the recording and the slides to everyone as well. And thank you, of course, to Emily and Lori for sharing all of their great insight.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.